Silver team, on me.
People need to stop comparing the Master Chief to the Mandalorian. As someone who's as big of a Star Wars fan as you can get, and also a relatively big Halo fan, I cannot stand this comparison. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Halo series on Paramount Plus and plan on watching it, spoiler alert, there has been outrage over the new Halo series that's frankly akin to The Last Jedi's outrage. In this series, not only does Master Chief take off his helmet in the very first episode, but he also takes off his armor in the second episode, and we see him butt naked in the third episode. This pissed off a lot of Halo fans because in 6 major titles in the Halo series, not once have we seen Master Chief's face, well, besides seeing his eyes in the legendary ending of Halo 4.
Has already begun. And we are hopeless to stop it.
So just on cue, hardcore Halo fans started freaking out because the series was supposedly breaking the cardinal rule of Halo and it was disrespecting the lore. I'll get to that in a second. Now, since hardcore fans of Halo wanted Master Chief to keep his helmet on the entire series, they often mentioned The Mandalorian and how that show was able to convey emotion through Mando's helmet. People also love to compare the characters of both Master Chief and Din Djarin because they both began their stories as people who don't really say much and have very little in terms of personality, but as the story progresses, we learn more about them and the characters start opening up as well. While they are correct in saying that The Mandalorian does a fantastic job of conveying emotion through a helmet, and they are also correct in pointing out where these two characters began their stories compared to where they are now, these two characters couldn't be more different. First and foremost, the Master Chief doesn't really have any personality or any strong character traits in the first 3 Halo games. Yeah, he makes cheeky one-liners and you can tell he cares for Cortana.
Halo, it's finished.
No, I think we're just getting started.
Sleep well?
No thanks to your driving, yes.
So you did miss me.
But Chief gets a fraction of the character development in his original trilogy compared to what Mando gets in his first episode alone. It's not until Halo 4 where Master Chief starts to get real character development, and even then a good portion of the Halo fan base hates that game, even though I happen to think it's by far the most underrated campaign in the franchise. Now, the biggest reason why Master Chief works so well in the original 3 Halo games, despite having close to no character development, is because Master Chief isn't really supposed to be an individual character in those stories. He's more of an avatar so the player can insert themselves into the universe. Since Halo is a video game, this works wonderfully and the games were a huge success. However, since the Halo series on Paramount Plus is indeed a television series and not a video game, keeping the Master Chief basically without character traits is a path to disaster. I don't care what type of show or movie you're creating, you cannot have your main character be as one-dimensional as Master Chief is in the games. So the series widely decided to give Master Chief a bit of a personality and an actual character arc to make the series interesting. So if you're one of the fans who believe that Chief should have no personality in this show, there's no point in comparing him to the Mandalorian because Mando goes through serious character development in pretty much every episode he's in. But of course, this is only a fraction of the argument compared to the helmet debate. Now, I'll admit it, I would have liked it if they didn't reveal the Chief's face until later in the series, but the outrage the series is getting over simply showing Master Chief's face is nonsense. The most obvious and biggest difference between Master Chief and Mando is that Mando has an actual reason why he needs to keep his helmet on.
It is forbidden. No living thing has seen me without my helmet since I swore the creed.
And Master Chief doesn't. It's a part of the Mandalorian code that Din Djarin, aka Mando, keeps his helmet on. This is established in the very first episode and is a major plot point throughout both seasons of the show. In both the Halo games and the television series, there is no valid reason that the Chief needs to keep his helmet on while he is not in combat. Whenever I see keyboard warriors yelling on Twitter that the Chief needs to keep his helmet on, I always ask them why, and they just respond by saying he never took his helmet off in the games. For one, that's an awful reason. If you can't give an in-universe reason why the Chief should keep his helmet on outside of combat that isn't because the games never showed his face, then you've lost me. And as I've stated before, the reason why we never see Chief's face in the game is because he's an avatar for the player. Seeing Chief's face would make you see him more as a character than an avatar, and that's not what the series was going for. Also, so many of these fans scream that the show is disrespecting the Halo lore, but these same fans also don't realize that the books of the Halo universe have Chief take off his helmet all the time when he's not in combat. So don't say the show is disrespecting the lore when you don't know the lore behind Master Chief himself. As unusual as it is for the Chief to take off his helmet in this series, I think it makes perfect sense for the story the show is trying to tell. This whole debate about Master Chief's helmet and all that to me says a lot about a wider problem that fandom has today, and that's fan entitlement. I watched a documentary a while back called The People vs. George Lucas. Basically, this was a documentary about the response to the Star Wars prequels. A question that was raised in that documentary was, are fans entitled to the franchise that they love so much? And I passionately say no. Almost every time a story is told and the main priority is to please the fans, it goes horribly wrong. Just watch the 2017 Justice League movie. That movie was a major course correction from Batman v Superman, and it turned out to be one of the worst comic book movies ever made. When it comes to the Halo fandom, I'm noticing that fan entitlement is plaguing that franchise similar to how it plagues the Star Wars fandom. When The Last Jedi came out, the fandom was full of people screaming that Rian Johnson couldn't do this and couldn't do that, and that he was disrespecting the fans and their theories on what's going to happen. Now, as obnoxious as a lot of those complaints were, at least there is some basis for that argument considering The Last Jedi is part of the same continuity of the original 6 Star Wars films. When it comes to Halo, the series is not a part of the same canon, so the fans who are screaming at every difference between the show and the games sound like such babies. Like, oh no, Master Chief takes off his helmet, and God forbid the model of Cortana they decided to go with doesn't have her boobs hanging down right in front of you. Now, I'm not really a big fan of the Cortana design in the show, but it doesn't really bother me all that much. I actually think the complaints about the designs and sounds of certain things in the show are some of the lamest complaints out there. Again, people are livid about how Cortana's design is different when in literally every Halo game Cortana has a different look. Also, people complained that the guns don't sound the same as the games when in most of the games the guns sound different from game to game. Like, would it be cool if the guns sounded the same? Sure, but stop acting like the showrunners are disrespecting the lore because God forbid the guns sound different. There are so many little nods to the games that fans completely gloss over because some things are different. Fans do not own the franchise they love, and when they start to act like they do, storytellers turn away from the franchise because of the fans. I remember reading an article that a lot of writers didn't want to work for Star Wars because of the backlash that The Last Jedi got. It's a shame, really. Now, of course, you don't have to like the Halo show. I don't think the show is perfect, and I think it struggles in a lot of ways from a storytelling perspective, but a lot of people really need to take off their fan goggles, and just because something is different from the games, that doesn't mean it's bad. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Halo series and why people need to stop comparing it to The Mandalorian. Thank you everyone so much for watching another one of my videos. Don't forget to unite the Claude Squad, and I will see you guys next time.